Hello guys, welcome back. And today I'm going to be talking about the NHL trade deadline and all the minor trades that ended up happening. Now this NHL trade deadline featured some big trades, but there were a lot of minor trades that are definitely worth talking about. So what minor trades happened and what are my opinions on them? Watch till the end to find out. Now this trade deadline week was really crazy. We got big trades on Stone, Duchesne, a lot of solid players, but I already made videos on those players and I already made specific videos about those guys. But this video I'll be discussing all the minor trades and pretty much all the news that ended up happening. So basically, any trade that ended up happening between February 20th and 25th I didn't make a video about will qualify in this video and will be talked about in this video unless it's like something like future considerations. Now the first trade to go over is the trade on January 21st where Hagelin was sent to the Washington Capitals from the LA Kings in exchange for a 2019 third round pick and a 2020 conditional 6th round pick. And this trade is pretty interesting. As I mentioned in my podcast, I find it very weird seeing Hagelin in a Caps jersey, and we've already seen him play a game or two, I think. But it's weird seeing him go to the Washington Capitals after being a Pittsburgh Penguin, after being a New York Ranger. It's going to be weird, but I think it might be a solid ad for Washington, even if they paid a little bit too much. For me personally, I think the Capitals kind of overpaid a little bit here. You give away a third round pick and an extra pick on top of it, and while Hagelin has been a decent player in the past, winning 2 Stanley Cups with Pittsburgh Penguins and being a big part of those cups, I think right now he just is not worth that. He brings a lot of skill, he brings a lot of playoff experience obviously, but he doesn't do too much else. But the Capitals do need some depth, they need some depth scoring, and Hagelin can definitely bring it. Moving on to the next trade, and the next trade that I didn't talk about was the Nick Jensen trade. Nick Jensen getting traded to the Washington Capitals, and I actually called this on my Discord server. I actually have a screenshot of that entire phrase. I called Jensen going to the Capitals, and it made a lot of sense at the time. Now Nick Jensen goes to the Washington Capitals and also a 2019 5th round pick from Detroit in exchange for Madison Bowey and a 2020 2nd round pick. And all in all, I think it's pretty fair, and for the Washington Capitals, Nick Jensen will definitely be a very solid defenseman, especially heading into the playoffs. Now, for me personally, I don't see Nick Jensen slotting into the top 4 in Washington. While Washington's defense is not the greatest per se, I still think Nick Jensen will be a valuable asset on that Washington Capitals defense, and it's a team that needs a little bit of it, especially going into the playoffs. Nick Jensen is a smart ad. There wasn't too many defensemen actually available in the trade market, but Nick Jensen was definitely one of the better ones. Madison Bowey, so far his career has been a little bit unproven. He hasn't shown that much in the games that he has played. He hasn't been all too great, but I still think he has potential. He's still relatively young and could get a giant shot in Detroit. And of course, that 2nd round pick in 2020 is something that Detroit was always looking for. And getting a 2nd round pick from Nick Jensen is honestly a pretty great return for them. Now, the next trade was the Ben Lovejoy trade, and oh my gosh, as a Dallas Stars fan, I'm going to say this right now, this makes 0 sense for them whatsoever, and I know a lot of Stars fans feel the exact same way. Now, I was really tempted to make a video about this, but we had a couple of bigger trades at the end of the day that kind of swing me towards the other direction. But with this trade, it just baffles my mind. It really makes 0 sense whatsoever for the Dallas Stars, and I'm not even kidding there. While Ben Lovejoy does improve the penalty kill a little bit, he was terrible in that game versus Chicago, his debut with the Dallas Stars, and didn't give me any hope whatsoever that he would be anything other than a 7th defenseman for him. At least I hope. But for the Dallas Stars, in this trade, of course, they acquired Ben Lovejoy from the New Jersey Devils. They also, or the Dallas Stars gave up Connor Carrick and a 2019 3rd round pick, which is just way too much to give for a guy that is barely a 6th defenseman on New Jersey. When it comes to Ben Lovejoy, he's 35 years old, he doesn't have too much to give anymore, and he hasn't been doing anything for the past couple of years. I mean, he won the Stanley Cup in 2016 back with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and that is pretty cool. You get some playoff experience, and you get some character, but I don't want to be paying a 3rd round pick for character, for grit, for physicality, and Ben Lovejoy does give that, but I just don't think he's what the Dallas Stars need. The Dallas Stars don't need another defenseman. That's why they probably traded Connor Carrick in this deal. But giving up a guy like Connor Carrick, who's 24 years old, who wasn't given a great shot in Dallas anyways, and giving a 3rd round pick as well, just does not paint a great picture and doesn't rub me the right way whatsoever. Now, heading into trade deadline day, the next trade I want to talk about is Kinkaid getting sent to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, Kinkaid getting traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for a 2022 5th round pick, which is just amazing that we're seeing picks traded that far ahead of time. But it also shows how far Keith Kinkaid has fallen, at least value-wise. I mean, last year he was New Jersey's starter. He almost led them to the playoffs entirely by himself, besides Taylor Hall, of course. But he was great back then. And this year, he never really got off to the greatest starts and never really quite recovered, and his value just plummeted, obviously. And it was crazy to think about Keith Kinkaid being so bad this season that he was traded for a pick 3 years ahead of time, and it wasn't even a good pick anyways. So the Columbus Blue Jackets get an okay goaltender that might be NHL caliber for him. Maybe if he gets a new start in Columbus, it could prompt him to play a little bit better, but I feel like last year was a little bit of a fluke for him. He never really put up great numbers besides that year, and while he's a great personality, his Twitter is amazing. I hope he does play well in Columbus, but right now Columbus does have a little bit of a logjam of goaltenders now with Kinkaid coming in. Now the next trade involved the Montreal Canadiens and the Arizona Coyotes. The Montreal Canadiens trade Michael Chaput for Jordan Weal, and this trade is pretty interesting, and I think the Montreal Canadiens actually win this one. Now, Jordan Weal was acquired from the Arizona Coyotes from the Philadelphia Flyers earlier this season. He was looked at as a guy that would be a depth move for them, would be a pretty decent bottom 6 guy. He was okay for the Arizona Coyotes, never quite gelled in. He got some points, but wasn't that great, especially in the faceoff circle, where he usually was great in years past. And when it comes to Michael Chaput, he has had a couple of good games with the Montreal Canadiens, but overall has been pretty trash. So we'll see what the Arizona Coyotes actually use him as. They'll use him as an AHL guy, or maybe a bottom 6 guy, but I feel like the Montreal Canadiens get the win here because I think Weal has a ton more upside than Michael Chaput. Now the next trade involves the Calgary Flames and the LA Kings. The Calgary Flames acquire Oscar Fantenberg from the LA Kings in exchange for a 2020 4th round pick. And this trade is one that I think can benefit both sides, honestly. The Calgary Flames acquire a guy that is decent, both in his own zone. I feel like he can be a guy that can be useful for the Calgary Flames. And the LA Kings get a 4th round pick from a guy that really is not all too great. It is a conditional one, so we'll see how that one works out. But they did get a pretty solid pick. I mean, a 4th round pick is not that bad, and Fantenberg is not the greatest player. He was playing bottom 6 minutes for the LA Kings, which if you've seen that defense is a big understatement. So we'll see how Fantenberg does in Calgary, but I think he is a nice depth defenseman if used correctly. Now the next trade is the Columbus Blue Jackets and the New York Rangers. Columbus Blue Jackets end up acquiring Adam McQuaid for Julius Bergman, a 2019 4th round pick and a 2019 7th round pick. So the Columbus Blue Jackets get a solid depth defenseman. Adam McQuaid is okay if he's used as a 6th defenseman or maybe even a 7th defenseman. He is a pretty valuable guy, but he brings grit, he brings physical presence, and he doesn't bring too much more than that. So for the playoffs, I think he will be useful, but for the regular season, if you're trying to get actual wins and if you're trying to get goals, Adam McQuaid is not really that guy. But the New York Rangers do get Bergman, who was involved in the Erik Karlsson trade, was involved in the Matt Duchene trade. He's kind of switched teams a lot over the last couple of years, so he will be really a wild card there. But the New York Rangers were missing a 4th round pick and a 7th round pick in this draft, and they get them both from the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, this next trade between the Vancouver Canucks and the San Jose Sharks really does confuse me. Now, the San Jose Sharks acquired Jonathan Dahlen in exchange for Linus Karlsson, 1-for-1. And when I saw this trade, I was really surprised because I haven't kept up too much with the Utica Comets of the AHL this season. I know they've had a little bit of a fluky year with some of their guys like Cole Lind and, of course, Jonathan Dahlen. But when it came to that team, I never expected Jonathan Dahlen to be traded. He was looked at as a guy that could be a possible second-line center for the future in Vancouver. More likely a third-line center for them, but a solid NHL player. And he's had a good season up to this point in AHL, almost getting 30 points. He's a pretty young guy. I think he's like 21 years old, but I really was pretty high on Dahlen, especially with what he showed in the Allsvenskan a couple of years ago. I thought he was going to be a pretty solid player, and that was a guy that Vancouver should keep. But as he was not getting too much playing time, as the minutes started to decrease, it seemed like his agent, or at least the report was, his agent asked for a trade with about a few minutes or a few hours left throughout the trade deadline. So the Vancouver Canucks made a little bit of a hasty move and got Linus Karlsson. Now the next trade I want to talk about is the Pittsburgh Penguins acquire Erik Gudbranson from the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for Tanner Pearson. And when I saw this trade, I literally could not believe my eyes because Jim Rutherford has made some bad moves in the past, but I don't think anything will top this trade. Start out with Tanner Pearson because I think he's the least laughable part about this trade. Tanner Pearson is a pretty solid middle six forward. I think the Vancouver Canucks can definitely use. He was amazing to start out with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Kind of has fallen cold in the second half with them, but wasn't given a great shot, I don't think. And I feel like if the Vancouver Canucks use him as a more defensive forward and use him maybe a little bit on the power play, he could work quite well. And the Vancouver Canucks can need more guys like that are pretty talented. And Tanner Pearson definitely brings talent. On the other hand, you have Gudbranson, which the Vancouver Canucks should thank the hockey gods for somehow being able to get rid of him. But the Pittsburgh Penguins getting Gudbranson is one of the best things I have seen in so long. Gudbranson being paid $4 million for the next 2 years after this deal, or after this year. And just the Pittsburgh Penguins, this makes zero sense whatsoever with their team, their cap, but I still love it. And I still love how the Pittsburgh Penguins, for some reason, one, had interest in Gudbranson, and two, actually traded for him. You know, the Pittsburgh Penguins that won the 2016 Stanley Cup, won the 2017 Stanley Cup, yeah, they were full of gritty, terrible defensemen. Yeah, that was what they were all about, remember? Oh, you don't remember. Oh, is that why? Oh, it's not because they were a gritty defensive team that they won the Stanley Cup, Jim Rutherford. It was because they had speed, and they had youthful, and they had cheap wingers, cheap guys on the defense as well that led them to the Stanley Cup. They got great goaltending, and they won it back-to-back times. Not because they had defensemen like Gudbranson, but because they had speedy forwards like Connor Sheary and Jake Gensel. Jim Rutherford is likely making the excuse of, oh, he brings character to the locker room, he brings leadership, he brings physicality on the ice. Well, I'm gonna break it to you, Jim Rutherford, that was never why you got those 2 Stanley Cups. That is never why you got the 3 Stanley Cups in pretty much 8 years. That's not how it worked. That's not how the Penguins were successful. Not getting guys like Ryan Reeves last year. Not getting guys like Gudbranson. And trading a guy like Tanner Pearson, who is a solid ad for them and a guy that could perform in the playoffs and has playoff experience before. I'm pretty sure he won the Stanley Cup with the Kings back in 2014. He had playoff experience. Gudbranson pretty much has none, being on Florida and Vancouver in his career. And to me, it just seems like Jim Rutherford is playing NHL 19 for fun and trying to trade for the worst players possible to be able to make the worst team possible. Trading Gudbranson, literally one of the worst players in the NHL, consecutive years in a row. One, the Vancouver Canucks were stupid to trade for him. Two, they were stupid to extend him. But the Pittsburgh Penguins trading for him while he had that terrible contract and trying to get better in presence is something that is beyond stupid, and I can't even realize what that could be benefit for them. I mean, yes, the character, I guess, could help them in some way, but he's going to impact you so negatively on the ice that it won't matter anyways. But again, I just don't get it whatsoever for the Pittsburgh Penguins. It makes no sense, and while it isn't a hot take whatsoever, the Penguins going out and getting a guy like that is exactly the opposite of what they need right now, and is the least of their problems. The grit and the character can matter later, but getting some better players on that team is the real thing that matters, and Jim Rutherford completely failed in that department. Now, the next trade I want to talk about is Par Lindholm for Nick Petan, and it's a pretty solid one-for-one trade between the Maple Leafs and the Jets. Nick Petan being a guy that has been notorious for not getting any ice time whatsoever, not getting any games played under Paul Maurice. He's a guy that could get a new opportunity with the Toronto Maple Leafs. We've already heard him getting called up to the NHL team, which is a good opportunity for him to play alongside some pretty talented guys. So I'm hopeful for that. And Par Lindholm is a guy that can be pretty solid depth for the Winnipeg Jets. Can be a guy that, while they don't really have too much of a center hole there, could be a decent guy for them that I will actually hopefully get some playing time, unlike Nick Petan. The next trade I want to talk about is Michael Del Zotto going to the St. Louis Blues. Now, Michael Del Zotto goes to the St. Louis Blues in exchange for a 2019 6th-round pick, and my gosh, Anaheim actually was able to get rid of him. I would have thought they would be able to keep him out of necessity because no teams wanted him, but the St. Louis Blues, I guess, came up and had interest in Michael Del Zotto, which is really interesting because the St. Louis Blues have a okay defense. It's not like they are terrible up front, but in getting a guy like Michael Del Zotto, if they're going to plan on having him in the NHL, you might as well just pack up the day, because at that point, you might as well just give up. Now, the last minor trade of the trade deadline is Nathan Beaulieu getting traded to the Winnipeg Jets. Now, Beaulieu gets traded to the Winnipeg Jets in exchange for a 2019 6th-round pick, and I think this trade is pretty solid for the Winnipeg Jets. They get a depth defenseman who has been kind of flawed, hasn't been played the best in both Montreal and Buffalo. Could get a new shot in Winnipeg, and while he won't get a lot of playing time under that pretty solid defense in Winnipeg, he will still get a good opportunity to maybe win a cup or at least get close with Winnipeg, and I think it's a pretty solid ad for them. He didn't have to give up too much. I mean, a 6th-round pick is not too much for Nathan Beaulieu. He still has some talent and is a decent defenseman, and for Winnipeg, I think it's a nice ad for them. But again, with this NHL trade deadline, there was a lot of major moves. Again, I made videos on a lot of those major trades, but a lot of the minor trades were worth talking about. I mean, just that Eric Gudbranson trade probably deserved a video on its own, but I decided to keep it for this video. And there was a lot of minor trades that were really interesting and really interested in me, and while there weren't a ton of trades overall in this NHL trade deadline, there were some pretty solid ones. And again, that Jonathan Dahlen trade and that Eric Gudbranson trade were the most interesting of the bunch. But of course, with this video, I want to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments down below. So let me know, what do you think about this NHL trade deadline? What do you think about the minor moves that were made by all these teams? And of course, what do you think about the trades that were mentioned in this video? But if you guys want some more Grav videos just like this one, you can click on this card right here to watch my video about Marcus Johansson and him going to the Boston Bruins. But that is going for today, guys. If you guys did enjoy, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Again, comment down below your thoughts on these trades and the trades that I mentioned in this video. And I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. Goodbye.